name is Kirby Lockard, and you're watching one of the Design Drawing Videotapes. This is a series of 10 videos designed to help students of architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design learn to draw freehand perspective sketches. This tape is part of a 3-tape set concerned with perspective structure, and this particular tape is about laying out interior perspectives. Like the other videotapes, they are designed to draw along with me. So you must have a set of minimal equipment, like the equipment in this little blue glass. You're going to need 3 Prismacolor pencils, a red, a blue, and a green, 3 markers, a red, a blue, and a green, a white Prismacolor pencil, a black Prismacolor pencil, and more importantly, the tools you're going to draw lines with. You need a fine-tip black marker and a broader black marker. You're also going to need a supply of buff tracing paper, and it might be a good idea to take the time to pre-tear the sheets so that you're not taking the time to tear off sheets as we go through the video, because it's very important that you draw with me and try to keep pace with the drawings I'm making. If you fall behind or if it becomes confusing, take advantage of today's technology and just stop the video, rewind it, and play it back again until you can catch up. Now, you're also going to need the set of blanks that came with the printed material that came with the videotape. And if you have all that equipment and you're all set mentally, we're ready to start drawing perspectives. The first thing I'd like to do is review what we learned about perspective in the previous introductory tape. And I'd like to ask you to draw a horizontal line right across the middle of your paper, like that. Then I'd like to ask you to draw a vertical vanishing line down the left side of the paper and draw one down the right side of the paper. And understand that what we have just drawn is a 3-line, 2-point perspective framework, which is the one we're using to draw most perspectives. Now, please draw a vertical line right smack in the middle, or pretty close to the middle of that framework, and draw lines from the top of it and the bottom of it like this, because this is the way interior perspectives are normally drawn on this framework. The resulting drawing makes it look like you've been sent to stand in a corner. You get no real idea of the extent of the space. You don't know how wide it is in either dimension. So it's a very strange sort of drawing, at least in my view, and we're going to use a completely different way of drawing perspectives on this framework. What we're going to do is pull the wide side limit of the perspective clear outside the vanishing point. Please draw a vertical line like that beyond the near vanishing point. Then draw lines, very long lines, to the top and bottom of that. Let's guess what a square looks like. Draw the diagonals, and just extend one more 5-foot increment so we get a space that's 15 feet wide. Okay, now if you'll draw lines from that near vanishing point through the 4 corners of that rectangle we've drawn. You're drawing the intersection of the walls with the floor and the ceiling. And then if you'll take your black Prismacolor pencil and just tone in the ceiling, because ceilings are always dark. We need to put just a little tone on the ceiling. And even though it's the subject of future videotapes, and the next series of 3 videotapes is on shadow casting, and you won't understand it completely, just draw a shadow on the floor like that. We'll get to that in the next tapes so you can understand it. And then tone this very dark back in the shadow and across the floor so we get a sense of what it looks like when light comes into the space. Tone this wall just light gray because it's in shade. Pick up your sky blue Prismacolor pencil and put a little sky on the outside. Now let's draw a figure standing on the same, sharing the eye level we have, and another figure, so that there are a pair of figures there. Indication of some sort of horizon and a tree in the outside. Now we're beginning to get an idea, I think, of what a better interior perspective looks like. You might just take your white Prismacolor pencil and touch this sidewall to indicate the sunlight coming in. Okay, now what has allowed us to draw this perspective, which I think is much better because we're inside the space and we're able to see one horizontal dimension of the space. We know that's 15 feet. What has allowed us to draw this perspective on this framework was the fact that we pulled the wide side limit beyond the near vanishing point. That lets us get inside the space, and it lets us make drawings like this, and I think that's a much better way to draw interior perspectives. Now the next thing I'd like to ask you to do would be to draw with me the way we set this perspective up when we can't reach that far vanishing point. So please take another piece of tracing paper. Draw that horizontal eye level line with which we always start perspectives. Okay, draw over here a near vertical vanishing line. And this time let's draw two tapered lines. They start a certain dimension here above the eye level line, and they get a little further away as they go to the right. In other words, they're fanning out slightly as they go in the right-hand direction. Then draw a mirror image of that line just down here below, and it should start the same distance below as the other one was above, and it should fan out in a proportionate way so that we get two lines above and below the eye level line that are respecting the far vanishing point, which we can't possibly reach. In other words, they're responding or converging to that far vanishing point even though we can't reach it. The next thing we do is put the wide side limit clear out here. Okay? We draw a vertical line there, and that's the right-hand corner of the space we're going to draw. We would then guess what looks to us like a square standing in that plane, and I guessed it too wide. I'd better guess it there. And we draw the diagonals of that square. And since we can't possibly reach the vanishing point for diagonals, we just drop a vertical through their intersection like that, and we're going to extend this space by diagonals through the bisector. We draw a diagonal like that, and where it goes through the top line, we drop a vertical. That's 5 feet. We draw another diagonal like that, and that gives us 10 feet. So now we have drawn a space that is 20 feet wide, and we need to stop and color code this because I think that will help your understanding. We need to color the eye level vanishing line red. We need to color this near vertical vanishing line green with your green marker. And we need to color that plane we just drew blue with your blue Prismacolor pencil. I'll take a moment to color that plane. I think maybe it'll help you perceive it as a vertical plane that's running across in front of us. And we really probably ought to draw the diagonals that are in that plane blue. To keep in mind that all that drawing and all that measuring and extension of space is happening in a blue plane, which vanishes at a blue vanishing line, which we can't even reach. Okay, we ought to draw these diagonals blue. Okay, now let's say that the space we are trying to draw is only 20 feet wide, which means that we have come to a point we call the hinge in the previous perspective method. We call this the hinge. And we call it the hinge because that's where we hinge on a blue or a green plane which sits at 90 degrees to the first plane. To make us understand that that is a separate operation, let's put down a new piece of tracing paper. We redraw the hinge. We take our green marker and we draw near vanishing horizontal lines to this near vanishing point, like that. And we keep them coming in front of the blue depth or the blue width plane. Okay, now unlike the first plane, this plane we're going to color green. just so that we can see it as a separate vertical plane, intersecting the first plane at the hinge, but going to a completely different vanishing point on a completely different vanishing line. The way we judge or measure depth on this plane, and this is called the depth plane, is just like we did on the width plane. We guess or estimate what looks to us like a 10-foot square standing in that green plane. We draw the diagonals of that square. We drop a vertical line down through the intersection of those diagonals. We need to go back and draw in the eye level line because we're going to be using that. And even though it's on the tracing below, we probably need to repeat it on the top one. Okay, now we're going to extend space down the green plane by using diagonals. There's a first 5-foot extension. There's another one. And there's another one. And we can just keep doing that to get the depth we need to draw any perspective. Now, the source of all our measurements, let's redraw just quickly this blue plane so we can see both planes a little clearer. The source of all our measurements in this perspective method is either the blue plane or the green plane, so that the measurements we measure off on the blue plane need to be pulled out into the perspective along sort of invisible tracks from the near vanishing point. We have to pull those dimensions either forward in the perspective or push them back in the perspective along the same tracks. The depth measurements are just like that. We have to get them on the green plane, but once we have located them, we pull them across the perspective like this on more invisible tracks. Now, the difference between these two is that for the blue tracks, the near vanishing tracks, you can get them to go to this vanishing point. You know exactly where they go. The green ones are a little more difficult, the ones that come from the green plane, because we can't reach that vanishing point. So you have to learn to draw a set of lines which are parallel in space, but which respect, or that is converge, to a vanishing point which we can't reach. So this set of lines fans out as it comes down into the foreground, respecting that far vanishing point. Okay, now if you don't understand what we've been through, or if I rushed you a little bit, please stop the videotape, rewind it, and go back over it. And when you're sure that you do understand and you're able to keep up okay, you can go into what now is the next segment of the videotape, where we're going to draw a real perspective. And you need to go in the material that came with the videotapes, you need to select the drawing that looks like this, which is an aerial perspective of the space we're going to draw. You need to take the time to get real familiar with this space, because I don't want to use up the time on the videotape verbally describing it to you. You need to become just as familiar with this space and its dimensions as if you had actually designed it. And when you've done that, we're ready to draw it. I'll just say that it's a space that we're going to be viewing from the right-hand side. It has two levels, a lower level, which is a bunch of red squares here, and an upper level. There's a freestanding wall, and there's what might be a little patio out here with a low patio wall going across, and there's a set of steps here. This dotted line indicates that there's a roof across the space at this point, and the roof extends backwards like this. The roof is eliminated for clarity in the perspective. The way we're going to draw this perspective is like we did on the exterior perspectives. We're going to put down two planes, a blue width plane that goes across the perspective in front of us, on which we'll be measuring widths, and a green depth plane that goes along the left-hand side, on which we'll be measuring depths. And now I think you can take this framework, which came along with the videotapes, and the only reason for giving you this is so that the drawing winds up a controllable size. If we had you draw it yourself, it might either become too small or be too large. And so this is simply to sort of control the size of the drawing. You could easily draw one of these by yourself. We need to overlay that. And the first thing we need to understand about it is that this is eye level. So let's draw a figure there, which will remind us that that's our relationship to the perspective. And let's draw the eye level vanishing line right through that figure's eyes. Let's draw the near vertical vanishing line through there, and this is the near VP. Let's draw the wide side limit down that side and just retrace these two lines from the underlay like that. Now that space is 10 feet high, and this plane is running across in front of us. It's the width plane. So the first thing we're going to do is guess what looks to us like a 10-foot square standing in that plane. And I think that's about what a 10-foot square would look like. We can then draw the diagonals of that square. We can drop a vertical through their intersection. We can extend 5 feet to the left and 10 feet to the left, because that's how wide the space is. The spaces that we're going to be drawing is 20 feet wide. So now we have reached what we've been calling the hinge. You need to heavy that up because that's the left-hand extent of the space, and that's from that point is where we're going to hinge on a green plane, which goes back to this near vanishing point. So maybe you should change colors, and we'll continue the color code at least for this plane so that you see it as separate. And we need to draw two green lines going to that near vanishing point. The next thing we need to do is guess a 10-foot square standing in that green plane. And I'd guess it's about there. Now, when we're willing to make that guess, we can draw the diagonals of that square, drop a vertical through their intersection, and mark off 5-foot increments by using the diagonal through the bisector. Here we go. Now we're measuring backwards toward the near vanishing point. We're going to need 10 feet for the room we're in, and then I think we're going to need another 10 feet for the patio. You need to leave the little aerial perspective somewhere where you can look at it occasionally so that you don't lose track of it. See, what we're doing is measuring along this green plane. We made a depth guess out here, then we extended 10 feet, and we're going to need to extend 10 more feet to get the patio in. Okay, so here was our 10-foot guess. And then we extended two 5-foot increments, and that gave us the room that's just in front of us. And then these two more gave us the patio, because each of those is 10 feet. Okay, now I think, let's draw, because they're green lines also, let's draw lines from this near vanishing point through the intersection of the floor and ceiling and through the intersection of the wall and ceiling and the intersection of the wall and floor. Okay, now with that, I think we're ready to put down an overlay and begin to draw a few more details into perspective. And one of the advantages of working with tracing paper is that when the thing gets pretty confusing, or when you have made all the structuring necessary, you can then lay down a new piece of paper and just draw the stuff that you want to keep in the perspective. For instance, let's draw a line right here, because I think you'll see that this is the right-hand edge of a freestanding wall in the space. So we need to be reminded of that. That's the front edge of the wall. But more than that, let's draw the footprint of the whole perspective now on the ground. We can do that. We'll ignore the level change for the moment, and we'll draw a footprint of the room and the patio beyond on the lowest level. Now to do that, we need to pull a line across there, and this is one of those tapered lines that's neither parallel to this line or the eye level line. It's sort of in between those two. It fans out slightly, but not as much as the bottom line. Maybe it's about like that. That's the extent of the patio on the floor, on the lowest level. Now let's get the extent of the room we're in. And it's out 10 feet there, so we can pull that line across like that. We can retrace this line, which is where the front of the wall is. Okay, now let's draw the footprint of that freestanding wall on the floor. We know that the right-hand edge of the footprint is right here, but be careful that you don't trace this diagonal, which is underneath here. We need to go from here to the near vanishing point. And maybe let's take the time to draw a red eye-level line, because we don't lose track of the structure of the perspective framework, and a green near vertical vanishing line, like that. Okay, remember that that's the point that is controlling the perspective. Now let's go from the bottom of this vertical line to that vanishing point, like that. And realize that that much of it we're going to need for the perspective. That's the intersection of the right-hand side of the wall and the floor. If you look at your little aerial perspective, you'll see that this wall we're drawing is 15 inches thick. It's 1 foot 3 inches thick. And this is the way we get that thickness. We know where this diagonal went through the eye level line, that marked off a 5-foot square. So we can draw the diagonals of that square. So drop a vertical, and we know that now this little square is 30 inches. And we know if we draw another diagonal, like that, we will have divided the 30 inches in half, and we will have gotten the dimension we want, which is 15 inches. So that's how thick that wall is. It's a pretty thick wall. So we can carry that up to the top. We can draw the top of the wall, and now we can draw a line from the top of that wall to the near vanishing point, which is going to be the intersection of the wall with the ceiling. We draw a line like that, and we can draw a vertical line up out of the footprint of the wall like this. So that's our freestanding wall. And let's take the time. We didn't really complete its footprint on the floor. Let's draw a line there, and let's take our red Prismacolor pencil and make that footprint red. And we even know where that hidden corner of the wall is. It's there. Okay, so that's the freestanding wall. Now that lets us draw another important thing. We ought to probably, by the way, repeat this line. We've got this line. We need to redraw this line. And notice where the roof is now. The roof goes from this point to this point, and we don't know where it is over here, but these 2 points will predetermine where it ends up on the right-hand side. So we can draw that across. We can draw the underside of the roof edge. There it is. This line will come on down to there. The other thing we need to look at is the extension of the vertical 10-foot high walls. We'll see that they go all the way out to the end of the patio. So we can draw those out to there and raise this corner from there. Okay, so we're now beginning to get a shape of the space, and we might just take a moment and take our black Prismacolor pencil and color or shade the roof in, so we can begin to understand that we're under this roof. And roof or ceilings are always dark because they only get reflected light. So we can do that to the space, and we're beginning to see what the space is going to look like. We still have a couple difficult things to do, or complicated things to do. One of the first ones is to raise that level up 2 foot 6 inches. Now let's talk a minute about how we get heights in perspectives, and understand that anywhere in the perspective it's 60 inches from eye level to the floor. So it's 60 inches from eye level here to the floor, and that's right where one of the level breaks is. So let's just divide that. We can just visually divide that in half, and we can draw that level coming across there and dropping down there. Now that's the surface that faces us. Let's see where that is in this perspective. We have just drawn this surface where the level of the floor steps down or steps up 2 feet 6 inches. This is 2 feet 6 above this level, and that's what we just drew there. So we can see it a little better, and because it's one of the surfaces turned away from the entering light, let's color it in gray. And let's color the end of this wall gray. So we begin to see those as a set of planes that face us. Okay, now we can raise the whole level up, and the best way to think about that is by, as if it were a watermark. Let's find 2'6" high on this sidewall. To do that, we just carry that line across to there, or we just divide this in half. And that allows us to draw a watermark at 2'6" high down this whole sidewall like this. And back there we can draw it across the back of the patio, like that. And when we get to there, we can come to here, and they should agree. They should come pretty close. Okay, now can you see the upper level? I hope you can see that upper level beginning to build. Okay, let's look at where the steps are. The steps occur, and I've slipped just a little bit out of register. Okay, that's good. The steps, the nose of the first step occurs at 5 feet. In other words, it comes down this wall 5 feet, and we can draw the nose, and we already have that. If you look underneath, you see the 5-foot green measurement on the green plane. We can pull the nose of the top step across. Now we have to draw a set of steps that comes from there down to here. And those steps in that 5 feet distance, they divide up, first of all, there are 4 levels going from this lower level to the top. So we can draw those by first dividing the vertical dimension in half, and then dividing it in half again. Those are the levels of the treads. We can also see that the steps are divided into 4 equal tread dimensions. So we can divide that in half and half again. And then realizing that the first tread dimension is actually on the floor, we can draw in the stairs on the sidewall. They'll look like that. All we need to do is pull those lines across the perspective then, like this, and we have the set of stairs. Now, we need to draw the distant wall, the little low wall, and it's 2'6" above the upper level, so it's at 5 feet. The top of the wall is at 5 feet, which is eye level. So the top of the wall is going to come right across there on the eye level line. The only problem is to get the end of it, and to get the end of it, we need to go way down to the bottom level. We need to draw the continuation of the footprint of the freestanding wall back to there, and then just raise a vertical, and that's the wall. That's that distant patio wall. Okay, now I think we can take the time to put down a new piece of paper. One of the advantages of drawing by overlay is that when the drawing gets messy and so full of construction lines, we can just lay down a blank piece of paper and just draw the good lines. So let's do that. First thing we need to do is just retrace all those lines that are necessary in the perspective, but leave the construction lines on the layer below. When you do this, you can always improve the quality of your lines, because now, using the underlays as guides, you can draw long, confident, freehand lines that have a lot better quality than those first ones did when you were just trying to measure things and lay things out. And your mind was on getting the perspective structured rather than making a finished drawing. The steps particularly, I would imagine you could improve. I can improve mine quite a bit. We should see a little more of each tread as we come down the stairs. In other words, each horizontal surface of the steps should get wider as we descend down the stair, because they're getting lower in relationship to our eye level. Even though you know we're going to profile some of these lines, let's just draw them all the same line weight first, because I think you will appreciate what profiling does more if we do that. So we're just, be aware of changing the posture of your hands as you draw these lines. This particular line right here, from upper left to lower right, is really hard for right-handers. Okay, now if we've got all those basic lines, we can pick up your fat Prismacolor or your fat marking pen, and we're going to heavy up or profile those lines that are spatial edges. That means they represent corners where there is a hidden surface sort of around the corner. These are the edges that carry a lot more information about the environment than just the normal intersections. as we move in the environment, these are the guys that slip and slide against their background. Now, have we got them all? I think so. I think those are all the edges. Now, I'm not going to reshade this because we can see the shade coming up from the drawing below. The only thing I'm going to shade is the riser faces, which I forgot the time before. They would be a member of that set of transverse vertical planes that are turned away from the light. What I am going to do is take the white Prismacolor pencil. Oh, we forgot this one. You got to tone this one too because I didn't get it on the underlay. Now if you'll take your white Prismacolor pencil, we're just going to touch, without casting shadows, just going to touch what we know would be a sunlit surface and just kind of let the white fade out as it gets back to here. And let's just touch the face of this one and sort of let the white fade out. And we might take the gray because we're going to assume the sun's coming from the right and just kind of gray that in very lightly. I think we also have time to draw a couple of figures. Even though they are the subject of a subsequent videotape, I think you could try a couple over here. Don't worry about how well you can draw them because we'll take that up later. Let's draw three figures standing there. I think we can draw kind of a basic tree in the patio, a bare branch, leafless kind of tree. Adds a little figural interest. The other thing it does is it calls your attention to the fact that there's continuous space out there above the roof because it disappears behind the roof. We can take our blue Prismacolor pencil and add a little blue sky down to just above the eye level line, and then we can draw some sort of a horizon out there. Let's say that we take our green Prismacolor pencil and add a little distant landscape color back there and maybe above the wall. And then we could take our black marker and draw a horizon line. Mountains are the easiest, or some sort of rolling foothills, and maybe a line, a ragged line over the green landscaping, so that we've taken care of the distant context. And I think we have time to cover one more important thing, and that's how to lay out an alternative way of laying out a grid on the floor. If you can find your near vanishing point, which is back here, I think you can pull out a line on the floor like that. You can draw this line across the floor and recall or refer back to the little perspective and see that this is a 10-foot square in the floor. Now, we could subdivide that square into four 5-foot squares. If we can see down through our original layout, I think we find that the 5-foot division is about there, and we can just pull out a line on the floor like that. Now, what we need to do is draw the diagonal of that floor square, the one that we know is 10 feet square. Okay, and we're going to mess up our perspective by drawing a brand new construction line across here, but let's go across like that until you get an intersection with the red eye level line. And where you do, that will be a vanishing point for this kind of diagonal. Just as we found vanishing points for diagonals in vertical planes, we can do the same thing in horizontal planes. Where that diagonal crosses this bisector, we can bring another one of those lines across, and we have divided that 10-foot square into 4 5-foot squares, just like we did in vertical planes. Now that's a really neat capability because that means we can come from this vanishing point again with another diagonal like that, and where it crosses this 5-foot line, it will mark off the next row of 5-foot squares. We've got to come over here and draw our 5-foot division on this side, which is about there. Whoops, probably more like that. Okay, now, notice that we can come from this vanishing point through here and get a diagonal which is crossing 2 of these. So this should give us one more, and this will give us another. Now, if we change colors so we don't get mixed up, we can put in the 30-inch squares. And what I'd like you to do is, let's say we're going to pick those up with the red, since it's a horizontal surface. Let's take your red marker and draw another grid of lines like this and like this. In other words, we're dividing in 2 the first grid that we had. So this new grid we're drawing is a 30-inch grid. Now notice every place a diagonal crosses those red lines, we can draw in an intermediate red line. Notice also, even though it's sort of distracting to have it in two different colors as a drawing, but notice how much it contributes to making that horizontal surface lie down. So floors are one of the first places you want to put textures in a drawing. Let's kill that a little bit. If you have a brick red Prismacolor pencil, or even your regular red, I think if we just color the floor, we can maybe kill the effect of those gaudy red lines we put on there at the last moment. And take just a moment and just admire the little perspective we have drawn in a very short time with a very simple set of equipment, mostly with our own ability to draw freehand straight lines and our knowledge of an underlying perspective structure that will allow us to do this. The accuracy or skill in drawing does not reside in a set of tools you use. And one of the great advantages of this perspective method is you can draw perspective like this anywhere. All you need is a pen and a napkin. Any piece of paper, you could draw it with your finger in the sand. It is not at all dependent on any set of equipment. It's more dependent on capabilities that you can develop and reuse, that you own. You know, they're part of your skill and your knowledge. That's why learning to draw freehand perspectives is so important. It allows you to represent the things that you design anywhere, anytime, with the simplest of drawing tools. Now, if you didn't understand part of this, if I rushed you, if you were a little confused or a little hurried, please go back and just replay the videotape. Stop it, rewind it, and replay it. If they still have trouble with it, try turning off the audio. Just turn off my chatter so that the words I'm saying don't distract you, and you could concentrate on just the visual images and keeping up with those. And when you have replayed it, or if you understood it the first time, we're ready to go on to the next segment. And in this segment, we're going to draw quite a bit more complicated interior perspective. But it's important that we get the repetitions, that you do one and then another and then another. So if we're ready for that, let's pull out of the packet of drawings that came with the videotapes the one that looks like this. This space that we're going to draw is a little bit more complicated, but it has some similarities. Like the other one, it is two levels. And in this case, however, there's only 15 inches difference between the two levels. We're going to draw it from the left-hand side instead of the right, so you don't get hung up on left and right problems. This has a little gable roof portion and then a flat roof portion, and in this one we're going to draw the window frames that separate the outdoor patio from the indoor space. But like also in the other one, you're going to need to get familiar with the dimensions of this space in order to draw it, as familiar as you would be as if you had actually designed it. And when you're familiar with it, we're ready to go. We're going to do the same thing we did in all our perspectives. We're going to run a width plane across the main facade where most of the dimensions are, which is we're going to run it right across that window frame that separates the patio from the indoor space. We're going to measure across there after we guess a 10-foot square. We're going to come to the hinge at the far end of the space, or side of the space, where we hinge on a green depth plane, make a 10-foot depth guess, and extend that in order to get all the depths and widths we need. Now remember, we're going to have to pull these across the perspective. Once we get a depth dimension, or once we get a width dimension, we're going to have to pull them out into the drawing to wherever we need them. In one case, we'll be pulling them from a near vanishing point. In the other case, we'll need to draw that fanned out set of lines. And you need to begin the perspective by putting down this framework, which came with the videotapes. The only reason we give you this, again, is to control the size of the drawing. You could very easily draw this yourself. It simply consists of, and let's put down a new piece of paper and retrace it. It consists of a near vertical vanishing line, and the horizontal eye level vanishing line, and they intersect at what we always call the near vanishing point. Then there are these two tapered lines, which are converging ever so slightly to a far vanishing point that we couldn't possibly reach. You need to retrace those. You need to draw what we call the wide side limit of the perspective. And remember that it's pulling that out beyond the near vanishing point that allows us to get inside the space and draw a really dynamic interior perspective. We start off by guessing what looks to us like a 10-foot square standing in this width plane that's running across in front of us. We need to draw the diagonals of that square. We need to drop a vertical, and we need to extend by diagonal through the bisectors increments, 5-foot increments of space. Now this space is 25 feet wide, and you may need to refer to the perspective, the aerial perspective that came along with the videotapes. You may need to refer back to this if you're not familiar with the measurements, but we need to measure 10 and 5 for the fireplace and then another 10. So the space is actually 25 feet wide. We have 20. Let's get another 5. There's 25, and we've come to the point that we call the hinge. So you can darken in that line and realize that we've measured all the way across the space, and it's time to hinge in the green depth plane. So take your green marker and draw lines from the near vanishing point through the top and bottom of the hinge, and just keep them coming like that. Okay, now you need to visualize that as a separate plane. And if you're having a little trouble with that, I would recommend that you still take the time to color it in with vertical green strokes so that you can perceive it as a vertical plane that's intersecting the first plane at 90 degrees. Okay, now we're going to guess or estimate. By now I think you've done enough of this that you can dignify this operation by saying estimate instead of guess, and you should be getting a lot more accurate at it. We're going to guess or estimate a 10-foot square standing in that green plane. We're going to draw its diagonals. We're going to drop a vertical through the intersection of those diagonals, and we're going to extend the space by the same method we used in the front plane, by diagonals through the bisector. There's 5 feet back, there's 10 feet back. We only need to go 15. That's all the deeper the patio is. There's 15 feet back. So that's the extent of the patio. We do need to come forward into the room, though. Here's the fireplace. We need to come another 7.5 feet because that's what the stairs are. There's 5. We need to get another 5. That's there. I'll bring that down. And I'll see 5, yeah, 7.5. So I need to get just enough to be able to bisect that and get 7.5. That's the point I need right there. Okay, now I have all the widths and I have all the depths that I need to draw this perspective. The next thing to do is draw the floor plan's footprint. In other words, draw the floor plan on the floor of the perspective. To do that, let's draw the intersection of the wall and floor over here and the intersection of the wall and ceiling there. Oh, we need to do one more thing. This space is a little more interesting than the other one because it has a little gabled roof portion. If you look at the base reference perspective, the aerial perspective of the space, you'll see that right above here there is a little gabled roof portion. And we just come up with a vertical from the intersection of those diagonals. We estimate that if this is 5 feet, there's another 5 feet because that's how high it is to the ridge. And we can draw the little gable roof. We can also draw from the near vanishing point. Now don't get these 2 points confused. It's easy to do, but this is the boss point. It's the near vanishing point. This other thing is just the intersection of the diagonals of the first square. So maybe it's better to put down a new piece of tracing paper at this point. Take your red marking pen and let's just redraw the main frame, the main framework on which we're drawing this perspective. And that's this horizontal eye-level vanishing line. And take your blue marker and draw this near vertical vanishing line. so that this near vanishing point becomes dominant and we don't get it confused with that other point. Now, looking down through that overlay, we can draw a line from the near vanishing point along the ridge of the little gable roof space like that. Okay? Let's repeat that triangle of the gable. Then we need to draw a line from the near vanishing point to this point, which you might call the eave of the gable roof space. From here on over, the ceiling is flat, so we can draw that line, and then we can draw this line, which is the intersection of the wall and ceiling. We can draw this line, and we can draw this line, and we can draw this other line like that. The first thing to do is let's draw the patio, the footprint of the patio, and we can see through here where we measured it. We measured 5, 10, 15. So from this point, which we know is 15 feet out in front of the width plane, we can draw one of those tapered lines across like that. Now be careful not to draw it dead parallel to this line or this line. It's somewhere in between the two. When we come to here, we can raise a vertical, and we continue the top of the patio wall toward the near vanishing point like that. We can get the extent of the left-hand patio wall. It's like that. We can raise a vertical there, and we can draw the extent of the right-hand patio wall. So there's the patio out there. Maybe let's just take the red Prismacolor pencil and color it in like that so that we make sure you see the footprint of the patio. There it is. Okay, let's get the footprint of the fireplace. We know that the fireplace starts 10 feet from the wide side limit. So we come over here, and we're going to pull the fireplace out just like a drawer from a chest of drawers. Here it comes. We need to pull out the back of the fireplace like that. Here it comes. And how far do we pull it? Well, if you refer to your basic plan, the little aerial perspective, and count the floor squares, you'll find that it comes out 10 feet. So we need to draw one of those fanned out tapered lines across the floor like that and say there is the footprint of the fireplace. Okay, let's come on and get the footprint of the stairs. The stairs we know occupy, they sort of sit within that same space, but they're only 7'6". They're 3 30-inch squares coming toward us, so that's what we did over here. There's 5 feet, and there's 7'6", so we need to bring a line across from there. I gotta get it to fan out just a little more. Okay, there's the stairs. Now, the stairs are only occupy half of that, so we can subdivide that by like that with an X. You can always subdivide any rectangle by drawing its diagonals. We can draw the top nose of the stairs is there, and the other stair tread is there. So what we have done is sort of laid out the floor plan on the bottom level. Now we need to pull some of it up. We need to pull that upper level up 15 inches. And we get the window seat and we get the entire upper level and patio level, but we got plenty of time to do that. First thing let's do is pull up the mass of the fireplace. So the perspective begins to get three-dimensional. Here it comes. Pull up the vertical corners. If you check your little aerial perspective that we're referring to, you can see that the top of the fireplace is at eye level. It's actually at 5 feet. So there it is. It'll help the fireplace read if we take our black Prismacolor pencil and just touch the back of it like this, because it won't be getting any light. So we can begin to see that as a plane that's facing us. Next thing let's do is lay out the whole window wall that goes across in front of us. And we can do that by just raising a vertical line there and a thickness, which would be the glass frame. We can raise a vertical line there from what we know is that distant corner of the fireplace. We can raise one there, which is where we know the doors are. We can put the edge of the doors like that and the thickness of the door frame. We can come over here and draw the window frame like that, and we can draw a vertical mullion down like this, coming down from the ridge. So that's the window wall. We can see that it's 5-foot spaces marching across in front of us. Draw a little thickness of the window frame at the top. Draw this horizontal mullion going across like that. Okay, now we're beginning to get a little definition in the room. It's beginning to look more like a space, or more like the space that we started off to draw. it may be about time to lay down another piece of tracing paper and change colors, because what we're going to draw now is probably the most complicated thing in this perspective, and that's defining the upper level. Okay, so let's put down a clean piece of tracing paper, just like making a fresh start, and let's find a way to raise up that upper level. Well, how will we do that? We know that this is 5 feet from eye level to the bottom, to the floor, and it's that way anywhere in the perspective. This is 5 feet, this is 5 feet here at the fireplace, this is 5 feet at that end of the fireplace. This is 5 feet way out there in the patio wall, as is this. So we have that 5-foot dimension all over the perspective. If we divide it in two, which is pretty easy to do just visually, then that's 30 inches, and the amount of that upper level is raised is 15 inches, which is half of that. So we can just do that visually everywhere. That's 30, then that must be 15. If this is 60, then that's about 30, and this is about 15. And if that's 60, this is 30, and that's about 15. So we get enough of those, we can begin to draw that upper level. Here's the nose of it, or the bottom of it, at the window wall. Okay, if we turn here and go toward the near vanishing point, we get the watermark of that upper level going down the patio. And when we get to there, we can turn and come across the patio like that. Okay, that's that upper level out there in the patio. You're not going to see part of that, but here comes that upper level down the sidewall. Just like a watermark or a ring around the bathtub, it's a level that's higher than the base floor level. Here it comes along the face of the fireplace. And it might be good to draw the nose of the top step. See, there's the top step on the underlay. We just pull it up like that. And that's the nose of that top step. And we know that it comes like that. Let's draw the corner of this little, what you might call a retaining wall of the upper level. It's right here. How high does it come? Well, we know that's 5 feet up to there. 5 feet from there to there. So halfway must be about there, and halfway again must be about there. So now we can draw that line at the near edge of the steps. Let's redraw the fireplace mass just as a reference point. There's the mass of the fireplace. Now, we need to get some divisions across the front of the fireplace because we have a window seat that comes in, let's see, here we can get, there's the fireplace over there. The window seat comes in 30 inches. It's a very deep window seat. Then there's a firebox of the fireplace. It's like this. What I'm doing is laying out the facade on the fireplace over here on this wall. And there's the extent of the fireplace. So, and then I'm just going to pull it across the floor. Here it comes. Just like it was on runners. Here it comes, and there is the firebox, the actual place where you build a fire in the fireplace. Here comes the window seat, which is at 15 inches, and that's how much it extends. And pull that across. There's the window seat. Okay. Now I need to get the stairs. We know the stairs, this is the bottom tread, and they're just one step, really. One intermediate step, and then we're up to the upper level. So that's what those steps look like. This is what the top of that little sort of retaining wall looks like. And if we look down through it, we can see that we're getting pretty close to having the thing described. Let's find the chimney. We know the chimney centers over the firebox, so we can lay it out over on this distant wall, and we can pull the center line of the chimney across the ceiling like that. We know also that it centers in this bay of the window wall, so we can pull the center line of it across like that. So we know that this then is the center line of that circular cylindrical fireplace stack. So we can draw it. It's pretty big. It's probably at least about that big. And when we draw its intersection where it goes through the ceiling, we want to draw a circle like that. We won't see the back part of it, but drawing the whole ellipse of that flattened circle will help us draw the top. Okay, now I think this has gotten complicated enough that it's about time to put down. Let's get the doors. This is a pair of doors. They're very tall, skinny doors. And they're going to sit right there. And the head member of doors and the base member of the door leaf is normally thicker than the stiles, so that's what the doors will look like. I only have a few moments left on this tape, so I'm going to, as quickly as I can, add whatever I can see to add to make this drawing look better. You, on the other hand, have all kinds of time, and you could go back over it, add shade, add blue skies, add figures, add a whole bunch of things that would make it look better. So I won't give you much verbal explanation for what I'm doing. I'm just going to try to do it. You would certainly spatially profile it, the drawing. You would add shade to those surfaces that were turned away from the sun. You might add a tree in the patio, like we did before. Trees do wonderful things behind windows because they show that the space extends continuously out there outside the building. You draw in the patio wall, which we haven't done yet. We hit just a little shade. And the one thing which I haven't talked about much or at all is how quickly you can indicate a rudimentary furniture arrangement, particularly in a perspective like this. If we take a 10-foot floor square, if we subdivide it so that we get 5 feet, and we subdivide it again so we get 2'6", so I get the right kind of size, I can very quickly pull up the backs of a couple of club chairs right here. Don't have to draw much of their detail. And particularly if I draw a figure standing behind them and I draw a figure seated in one of them, I have suggested a furniture arrangement in the room. It helps. The other thing that helps a lot with quick furniture arrangements is if you take the time to draw an area rug on the floor. There's something about that that sort of really defines, and certainly in drawings defines, a conversational furniture arrangement. Now let's see, we don't have time to do much more. The other thing I wanted to say to you is don't forget how quickly we have drawn a rather complicated perspective. What has allowed us to do that is our knowledge of perspective structure, our confidence in drawing freehand lines, and little else. We haven't used a T-square, we haven't used a triangle, we haven't used an architectural scale. We have drawn the entire perspective based on subdivisions of the dimensions of the human figure. This ability allows you to draw a perspective most anywhere, anytime, on a cocktail napkin, with your finger in the sand at the beach. All questions of equipment kind of recede into the background, and it lets you and your clients see the spaces you're designing much better than elevations or plans or verbal descriptions. If you had trouble with the tape, please replay it. Please try turning off the audio. Please go back over it and give yourself the opportunity to learn how to draw perspectives. Don't assume that it's too complicated or that you won't be able to understand it until you've given it a couple of repetitions to sink in. The next tapes are about shadow casting, and they're even more interesting because they make all your perspective drawings light up. They're probably the most beneficial things you can do to perspective.